Powered off. Is that powered off? Good morning. It is 8:45 on January 21st, 2020.
22nd.
Or January 22nd. What did I
Is
say?
it 23rd?
22nd today.
We have no agreement here, Mr. Chair.
January 22nd at 8:46. It's a little early. Yes, I still have coffee. If you would, please rise with me and join with me in our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, this morning we have budget meetings, so we are moving, we're going to do what we can first, and then we're going to adjourn and go into our budget meeting at 9 a.m. So first I'd like to do is do a line and duty casualty report. Commissioner Boyce?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I know we're a little pressed for time here today. One quick comment. Monday was Martin Luther King Day. Who can't remember, especially our age, the rise of the 60s and the legacy he left, love for his fellow man, and his striving to be free, to be liberated. Also, quick comment to the President is in Deauville, Switzerland, World Economic Forum. No politics here, Mr. Chair, but I believe the American dream is back, and he gave one of the best speeches, I think, that I've heard in a long time. The highlight for me and how it relates to Curry County, he's going to be challenging, promoting planting 1 billion trees throughout the planet. And I'm going to, subject to board's approval, I'm going to invite him here to plant the first one this spring, where we grow the highest quality, fastest growing trees on the planet. So stay tuned for that. We've already lost 8 officers, police officers, for 2020. We've lost 7 firefighters. That's kind of a high number for 3 weeks. Military deaths, just a quick paragraph here to bring things into perspective. The Iraq and Afghanistan war. As of last Saturday, at least 2,298 members of the U.S. military have died in Afghanistan since 2001, so 19 years, of course. According to the Department of Defense website, an additional 20,000, and this is a staggering number, 10 times, 20,683 U.S. service personnel have been wounded in action, according to the same website. In operations related, 21,000. In operations related to Iraq, a total of 4,500 members of the U.S. military have died. And also in Iraq, another 32,000 have been injured. I'd like to give a report on that down the meeting and give the board a little bit additional information. Thank you for that time, Mr. Chair.
Okay. We have public comments next, and I know we'd all like to give our public comments on the topics that they pertain to, so we're going to hold them for now. Representative Smith was supposed to be here this morning, and he wanted to give a brief presentation under public comments, but he's not here yet, so, pardon?
Could we go ahead and have public comments now then, and anticipating his arrival?
Yeah.
Would that be?
You know what, let's make the changes to the amendments to the agenda first. I forgot to do that, thanks, sir.
Welcome back, by the way.
Thanks. Do we have any amendments to the agenda?
We're doing a business meeting first. We're going to break for the...
With no amendments to the agenda, may I have a motion?
If I could, Mr. Chair, what titles do we have under exec session? What exec sessions have we listed subjects?
Consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, and individual, 1926602A.
Okay, and I believe we were going to have other topics talked about in exec session. I'm not sure.
I'd like to discuss an employee's performance?
So with employee performance, the rule on that says you do it in exec session except for when the employee requests a public session. So generally, you have to let the employee know about that and give them an opportunity to either participate or ask to be public. I think what we can do is talk to, in our break, we'll talk about that, and we can always add it to the agenda at the appropriate time. So
And if that fails, what I'd like to do is bring it up, can we bring it up under just some issues some things that happened on the campus in the last few days?
Perhaps, and
Security concerns.
you know, we are having a budget meeting. I think everyone will be presenting their budget. Sometimes talking about projects of a department or the activities of a department is appropriate in a budget discussion context as well. You could say, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about that kind of thing? I don't know if the board needs to hear anything about any pending litigation. I think that's all pretty status quo. We have that hearing tomorrow in the circuit court. So I don't have anything to add on that unless the board wanted to hear something. But I just wanted to make sure we were being mindful of that. So we'll take steps on that other, the employment, the possible discipline in a break.
Okay.
And come back to you. Thank you. That's all.
Chair, I
Okay.
might just have one addition to the agenda.
Yes.
Just item 10, depending on Brock Smith's arrival, may have a legislative update. If we could hold that open, I'd appreciate it very much.
Okay.
And one more thing.
Yes.
We're pretty action-packed here. Do we need, Mr. Chair, to look, Director Smelter, to look at a meeting possibly on the 29th just to catch up? I'm not saying we do. I just want to bring that before the board and see if I have any agreement there.
You probably know more where we are. I don't see.
We don't have any agenda items or anything that anyone has brought up to me, with me, that they needed us to act on before the next meeting.
Which will be the 5th, I think, right?
Right.
So you think we'll be okay?
I think we'll be okay. The other thing is we do like to have that extra week in there to get caught up on minutes. Because when we have a meeting every week, we don't get the minutes done. So I think we'll be okay skipping, or not having it as scheduled.
So you want a motion
Yes.
to approve the agenda?
Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Are you ready, Jay?
So we have,
Hey, roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, next, actually, I do see a public comment under 4. Mr. Barnes?
Morning, David Barnes. I have a question. I'm curious as to, ever since its formation, CCH has had a board member on it, and I'm curious now as to, all these years later, how it's become a conflict of interest or a potential conflict of interest for a board member to be on there. And I was hoping that when the matter came up later on, that you might discuss that, because I don't understand how, knowing a thing or two about ethics and conflicts, I don't understand how this is all of a sudden a conflict. And the commission, especially at this critical time when they're in the process of all changing, how it becomes that you should not have a commissioner on there. I would think would be the most important time to have one.
I'll let council talk about that. I think at this point, I don't think any of us should be making any public comments on that.
Just a very easy example of the conflict is we're currently in litigation in circuit court with CCH, and so that creates a conflict right there.
Okay, then I believe that rather than having that be considered a conflict, that would be a matter for recusal.
Right, I think, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. In other words, you could do it on a case-by-case basis where you could, if the matter of the litigation comes up, you recuse yourself from that issue. The interesting part there is the issues are so broad in the litigation, talking about the business organization, things like that. This is all public, matter of public record, that, and it's in the discretion of the individual commissioner to recuse or even to withdraw. But also, recently we had and I think it's on the agenda today, to amend our, it's called our subrecipient monitoring agreement.
Right.
And subrecipient monitoring program. And we checked on that with the state, And they said it's not a requirement to have a board member of the commissioners involved in that. And really, under the subrecipient monitoring agreement, the person who's most responsible for the oversight of the operations of the programs is a local public health administrator. And so to have a board member and the public health administrator kind of looking at the activities of CCH could create duplication of efforts, maybe some crossing of wires, things like that. So it's a discretionary decision. It's not a requirement. And for reasons of discretion, avoiding conflicts, not having duplication of effort, we've decided to, in our subrecipient monitoring agreement, remove that. Who CCH has on their board is up to them. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Boyce?
Yeah, just quickly, thank you, Council Huddle. I don't necessarily agree 100%, but generally I do. I think over time and in the future, this being a small county, I think we should have that representation. As you know, I resigned from that board for the reasons you outlined. Any appearance of a mixed allegiances there. So I agree with Mr. Barnes down the road. It is very important, and I think we all agree with that. Very important board. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Clay, I've got you down as for public comment, and if you'd like to approach now and discuss it now, because if not, you're going to be sitting here for a few hours.
I noticed that. John, do you have it? No, for the monitor?
Is that a stick for the?
No. What did you want on there?
I don't think we got it, Gordon.
It didn't happen?
I'm sorry. I don't think we got it.
Okay.
That would be my fault.
Okay.
I thought I sent it to him yesterday afternoon right after you left, but
That's okay.
Well,
maybe we
no.
can do it after.
Oh, let me
They
keep one for
had it.
JJ. Sorry. JJ.
I have these.
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
I'll go ahead.
I got one too. but
Thank you.
it's okay.
Just for the record, I believe Mr. Clay is speaking to a list that he provided the board, and all board members did receive a copy of that, Mr. Clay. So,
We wanted to put it up, the monitor, so people,
sure.
everybody saw it. For the record, my name is Gordon Clay from Brookings, Oregon. I want to share with you my picks for the Curry County Suicide Awareness and Prevention Council I call the Dream Team. It includes 2 new entries and has room for 2 additional members. 21 people applied for 15 positions on the council. The criteria I used for the evaluation process was, 1, they should currently be involved in one of the 14 stakeholder categories in the county. Number 2, have the ability to attend meetings. And number 3, lay people should truly be lay people, meaning they aren't part of any of the stakeholder groups. This provides a wider perspective from the outside versus doubling up on positions inside. Law enforcement. There we go. Hey, it works. Law enforcement. And pardon my pronunciation of names. Some of these are tricky, and my dyslexia and my tongue don't work together. For law enforcement, Maya Mello. She's a detective with the Sheriff's Department on law enforcement. First responder, Nancy Tournay. She's Curry County CIT coordinator. Medical health, Michelle Hanna from Advanced Health Coordinated Care Organization, North County. She's with the Coast Community Health Center that is bringing a pharmacy to Port Orford. Mental health, Teresa Costa. She owns a therapy clinic employing a number of therapists here in Brookings. Substance abuse and recovery, Beth Barker Hidalgo, a SUDS specialist. Youth education, Tim Wilson, superintendent of schools, Gold Beach. Elder services, Glenda Groff, a 10-year volunteer for the Chetco Community Center. Juvenile programming, Alicia Wibking Crone, Curry County Juvenile Department Prevention Specialist. Veteran Services, 40 years, Connie Hunter, 40 years working with all veterans in the city, county, and state. Tribal community, Katrina Thompson Upton, a registered citizen of the Tallawahdeeni Nation. Youth Advisor, Isabella Jermack, 19 years old, with 5 years volunteer work with Oasis. Media, Kelly Shellong, former mayor of Crescent City and sales manager of Bicoastal Media, the new owner of Curry Radio. Lay Position 1, Patricia Piper, served on the hospice board and Oasis shelter. Liaison 2, Kathleen Temple, assistant librarian, director of identifying local needs and reliable sources. Lay Position 3, Gordon Clay, a long-term builder of programs in schools and community to end suicide. What an incredible team of volunteers, henceforth to be known as the Suicide Squad, with the goal to wipe out suicide attempts in Curry County in my lifetime. We are still looking to fill the remaining 2 positions, mayor or administrator and faith-based leader, and I think we're very close to filling both of those. I want to thank the media, particularly the Curry County Reporter and Port Orford News, for running numerous articles on this search, to Curry, to KGBR, and to KCIW for all the PSAs they aired, and to the Insider for picking up the story and running it in their December issue to cover the South County. I also want to thank all of the stakeholders and the individuals who spread the word, and to all of the 21 applicants for coming forward in their busy lives to volunteer. We're getting off that no hurry turtle. This subject is too important. That being said, we hope others will join the stakeholders committees to help speed up this process with the goal of reducing and eventually ending suicide attempts in Curry County.
Thank you, sir.
Great work, Gordon.
Thanks.
That's amazing.
All right, we have some time constraints here, but we do have Mr. Representative David Brock Smith here this morning. So we are going to put him, because of his busy schedule, in front of our budget meeting. So Mr. Smith called me yesterday and asked me if he could do a brief presentation. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you, Chair Pash and Commissioners. Thank you for accommodating my schedule. We go into session, David Brock Smith, State Representative, House District 1 from Port Orford. We go into legislative session on February 3rd for a 35-day short session, and so I was headed down to South County this morning, and I thought that giving a quick update and asking and answering any questions. I know you have a very busy schedule. We were in legislative days last week. As you know, you probably heard a number of pieces of legislation. The cap and trade legislation is coming back. Not much has changed. They're attempting to basically try to keep the gas increase, which is estimated to be 22 cents a gallon in Portland, but there's no way to track it because the way that they're circumventing the two-thirds majority for a tax vote is basically saying it's not a tax on the citizens, it's a fee on carbon. And so they're essentially putting a fee on carbon at the import of the thousands of gallons of fuel that come in to Portland, and then there's no way really to track that for fuel sales just in Portland. And so, given that and the fact that the apple or the shirt that you buy in Portland is less than if you buy it in Brookings because of the transportation costs associated with bringing it down here. It's unfortunate. The 35-day short session was only meant when the citizens voted it in a decade ago to fix budget issues, to deal with some small pieces of legislation. It's not meant to deal with a huge cap and trade program. I'm still adamantly opposed to the program because of its a number of reasons, but also linking with the Western Climate Initiative and the carbon credits, if you will, with California. California is almost 10 times our size, and therefore 10 times the industry and the ability to buy those credits and drive up the costs of those credits. You probably heard of LC 38. LC 38 is the gun storage bill. It makes criminals out of law-abiding citizens. In essence, if you do not lock your gun in a gun safe or with trigger locks while in your home, and that gun is stolen and used to commit a crime, you could be prosecuted for that crime. As far as I'm concerned, your gun is already stored behind your locked door. Entry into your home and the theft of that weapon is already unlawful, and therefore inhibiting the ability to access that weapon and use it to defend yourself is only hurting law-abiding citizens. There'll be a number of amendments that are coming for these legislation. We don't know all the legislation. Every House member was able to drop, if you will, 2 bills, and every Senate member 1. That doesn't include committee bills and bills from the governor and so forth. There's a $1.7 billion surplus that's going to be coming in the form of a kicker to all of the Oregonians, which is great. It will come in the form of a tax credit on your statement. You won't get a check from the state of Oregon. There's also a $1 billion surplus. The governor wants to spend about $200 million for wildfire council initiatives. I appreciate Commissioner Boyce and his dedication to that council and all the work that's been done and the support from the fellow commissioners. Also, the speaker wants to spend $40 million on homelessness, and I am already in conversations with her to make sure that Curry County is not left out of any resources that would come to help our situation down here. And they want to put $500 million away in the rainy day fund. Now, mind you, they raised over $4 billion in taxes and fees in the last session. This is what a supermajority can do, and it's unfortunate, but we were able to protect our residents here in rural Oregon. Real quick, we had a Sudden Oak Death meeting yesterday in Bandon. It was spirited. Appreciate Commissioner Boyce and his dedication on that as well. We will be going to the governor for a one-time ask of $7.5 million. That's on top of the $1.7 million that we were able to get in the last session for treatment. Really, it's the EU1 strain that's here just north of Pistol River. That is the problem that impacts Douglas fir, grand fir, and so forth. We feel that and the task force feels that if we could have the one-time funds, we can get ahead of it and knock it down from its continual spreading. The problem with that the problem with the EU1 strain is it continues to spread, and once it hits the Rogue River, we won't have a partial quarantine in Curry County anymore. We'll have a full quarantine, which impacts any and all exports out of the county. And I think all of you got copies of the strategic plan, not only a strategic plan, but also the economic impact statement that we put together with the Oregon Department of Forestry. I have 2 bills that are coming in this next legislative session. One is a meat processing bill. We have a problem with our folks down in Brookings that raise cattle, for example. In order to commercially sell them to the local grocery store, they have to have them processed at Mohawk Meats in Springfield. It's the closest location. The transportation costs associated with that are huge, and it's frustrating to a lot of our ranchers here on the South Coast. There's a federal law that allows for state personnel to be USDA certified, which is what's necessary for the inspection process to have certification to be able to sell commercially. we're going to have ODA employees, this is what this bill does, move forward with some USDA certification. And then in 21, phase 2 of the legislation will then look for some resources to assist in those small meat producers and processors, to be able to invest in upgrades for their facilities to become USDA certified. And then really we'll have those ODA, USDA inspectors in south of Bandon at Mobile Ranch Butchering on Tuesday inspecting, and then over in Klamath Falls on Thursday, and in Pendleton on Monday, so that we can have those small processors be able to access. I mean, it's a tragedy that we have some of the best lamb, for example, in North County on Wall Ranches, and you go to the local grocery store and it's coming from New Zealand. Right? And then lastly, and more controversially, as I do, I've been involved in the carbon conversation ever since I left this position and went to the Capitol. I always come up with a alternative legislation so that we can have a larger discussion. And I have a handout for you, but in essence, the transportation sector in this state has a greater carbon emissions than agriculture, industry, and residential and commercial, and almost natural gas combined. And yet the legislation they're proposing does nothing to address those emissions and actually goes after the others, including natural gas. And with over 1.4 million registered passenger vehicles in the Portland Tri-County area alone, those are the emissions that need to be reduced. Rural Oregon sequesters urban Oregon's greenhouse emissions with our trees. The only really emissions that we produce are from the wildfires that are releasing that stored carbon because of the very environmental policies from the rural part or urban parts of the state that won't let us manage those resources, in my opinion. And so what the legislation does is in 2017, there was a transportation package passed, and in that transportation package, there was a privilege tax added. So when you go buy a new car, you have to pay a privilege tax to buy that vehicle in Oregon. Well, what was kind of eloquent about that piece of legislation and that part of that legislation is that privilege tax is based on where you register that vehicle. And so what LC 43, or what will be House Bill 4151, does is it increases the privilege tax, but only within the metro area of Portland, to add greater incentives for electric vehicle purchases only within the metro area of Portland. Currently, there's, like I said, over 1.4 million registered vehicles in the Tri-County area alone, but there's only 27,000 registered EVs statewide. And so somebody that makes less than 120% of area median income will be able to have an upwards of $10,000 EV rebate, not including federal, not including manufacturer rebate. So again, it only impacts the people within the metro area to assist them in transitioning from those passenger vehicles to EV vehicles. The other part of the legislation then has the PUC have PGE and Pacific Power roll out the needed charging infrastructure that doesn't exist within the metro area of Portland to service the new EV vehicles, and then they can collect their costs associated with those charging stations back on the rates, but only on the rates within the metro area of Portland. Thus, they have a density issue with regards to the Portland metro area that has the ability to do it at a lower cost than it would be if we tried to roll out charging infrastructure throughout the state. And you only have 2 electric utilities versus a number of others statewide. Now, for those that are upset right now because there's no charging down here, we were able to get over $10 million in resources for the West Coast Electric Highway, we call it, for EV charging infrastructure along 101, and that should be rolling out within the next, and in the spring. So again, just to summarize, the legislation only increases the privilege tax within the metro area of Portland to fund additional EVs for a transition for those rebate program for those folks within the metro area in Portland, and then increases the rates within the electric bills of those folks within the metro area of Portland to roll out the needed charging infrastructure necessary to deal with those new EVs and grid modernization. It's a way that we, again, go after the largest chunk of emissions, which is transportation. It doesn't impact rural Oregonians as their cap and trade bill would do. And it has it's the only legislation that I know of to date that has bicameral bipartisan support in the building, with 14 Democrats signed on and 14 Republicans. Happy to answer any questions.
I have one quick statement actually on the USDA. Could you, is that also going to qualify them for grading of beef as well? Because that, being a small producer of beef, grading of beef is very important as well for pricing.
Yeah.
Some USDA inspectors can grade beef and some can't. So you may want to look into that for
I
the bill.
appreciate that. I will. Thank you so much.
The other question I have is, as you know, and I know you've worked hard in the state last year, any progress made? I've seen all the letters going to Washington in support of a larger budget for our rivers and ports on the coast, of getting some of this, getting some of these ports cleared up, some of this excessive rock out of the rivers and the ports. Any forward steps that you have in the state this year to move that forward at all?
So Congressman DeFazio did move his legislation for the, as you know, I don't know of anything to date other than the $456,000 that we were able to get for the rogue sediment study, which the check's been cut, which would start, I believe, this spring. But as far as the other aggregate issues within, I believe we're on track for dredging, but I'm sorry, Commissioner, I don't have any further information.
Thank you. Commissioner Gold?
Just kind of a comment, when that law was passed to put in an extra legislative session, it was for emergency legislation only. And listening to you, I don't hear anything that is an emergency.
No. Well, thank you, Commissioner Gold. I think that the competitive bill against the cap and trade program is an emergency, but it's the fact that you have one that needs the other to have a larger conversation. Really what it comes down to, Commissioner, is this legislation, the cap and trade legislation, is predicted to bring in a minimum of $2 billion. And so...
Follow the money.
Is it about emissions or
No.
reduction, or is it about the money? So.
All right. Commissioner Boyce?
The DeFazio bill, he's really taken some incredible leadership on that, and it's a Port Securities or Stability Act for all of the Oregon coast. I think you're a little bit familiar with that. I would recommend the board consider writing him a support letter to just encourage him, nudge him, show him that we're behind him, we understand what he's trying to accomplish there. And yes, when you talk about Gold Beach and Brookings ports and the dredging we need to do, I could ask you dozens of questions. Thanks for your work on that bill that I think has the best chance for supporting rural Oregon on carbon emissions, and gives me great hope. I know that your district is 2.5 times the size of Curry County, and I want the opportunities to work with you and what you have accomplished for Curry County, and too with Senator Hurd. I don't know which is the most important, but the South County Emergency Room, the funding you got there, SOD. People say, what keeps you up at night? That's number one for me. And then your reference to the Oregon Department of Forestry. If you get any kind of funding, additionally above and beyond, based on what you reminded the board yesterday, the task force, the average, the last 7 fire seasons compared to the previous 7, I think it is almost 10 times the amount of responsibility and burden on them to get to these fires. And you also note just the work that's going on between the federal government, the state government, the local fire protective associations. We can really reduce that risk. So your aggregate study, the Port of Port Orford, the South County Emergency Room, and SOD, that's generating some federal funds that I didn't know if we'd see this soon. So just a huge thank you, and keep up the good work. And I know you are dedicated to the other parts of your district outside Curry County, but nonetheless, we appreciate your
Curry
effort.
County is my home, and some of the other parts of my district will probably be upset that I haven't taken the time to come and see them as well, but it is a large district, as you mentioned. I appreciate the partnerships that we have with this board and my other boards, and I thank you for your good work for our citizens. So.
Well, again, this board, and I'm sure a lot of the citizens in this county appreciate all your hard work, and for those that don't know, this is probably the hardest working representative that I've ever seen in the state. So
Appreciate that.
your hard work is much appreciated, and I look forward to years to come of working with you, sir.
You as well, sir. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our Budget Committee meetings, if we could. Sorry for the overlay on that. I know we've got some people here that have busy schedules. So if we could have our Budget Committee come up. Long meetings and the crowd gets smaller.
I like it.
All right, we are coming back into session on our weekly business meeting. Again, it is January 22nd, and it is 3:42 p.m. We are going to move on with our next agenda item, which is a presentation, PAF presentation to the board. Julie Swift. Good afternoon, Ms. Swift.
Good afternoon. Julie Swift, Payroll and HR. What you have before you are 2 personnel action forms for the Sheriff's Office. One is for Chris Shaver, who's a corrections deputy, and the other is for Stacy Krieger. You talked earlier about the change in medical services at the jail, and she is the nurse practitioner that's been hired on a part-time basis.
Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve these 2 hires.
Second, Mr. Chair. Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, next we're going to move on to the consent agenda to approve the annual co-op LEA operating plan with the United States Forest Service 2020, to approve snowy plover letter, and to approve an order adopting the revised local public health authority grant subrecipient monitoring rules. Man, is that a mouthful?
I move we approve the consent agenda as written.
Do I have a second? I'll second, Mr. Chair. Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, next we have a discussion item, approve final order Adams Appeal, AD-1907/A-1901. Ms. Crockett?
Okay, I can take care of this. So this was on our last agenda for approval, and basically it was affirming the board's decision on the Adams appeal. However, because court had abstained from that, we couldn't take a vote on it, or it would have been only one vote, so it wouldn't have been effective. So we had to move it forward to today's meeting to take a vote on it.
Okay. Commissioner Boyce?
No, I thought you abstained from it.
Either way, regardless of the rule, we needed to continue it to be able to get a final decision by having at least 2 commissioners in addition to Commissioner Boyce here.
Thank you for that clarification. I just remember we couldn't vote on it, so, no.
I don't want to ever abstain if I can avoid it.
Well, I move that we approve the planning committee's recommendation for the Adams appeal.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Further discussion? Mr. Chair, I just add time.
I'm sorry. He's shorthanded. Would have,
$4.
4 times.
what is this for? Did you hand that to me? Yes. That was uncalled for. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, I just feel bad because this would employ some people. I think the old timers would say this is the best thing for the mouth of the river. Back to your point, our rivers are getting corked at the bottom, and we're going to need a lot of gravel. I'm going to have a little report with ODOT here and Commissioner comments. That gravel is expensive, especially when it's transported. So, you know, I know it's been said, Ron Adams is a Vietnam veteran. He put a lot of time into this, and I just feel bad for him, and that's why I'm going to oppose it. Thank you.
And my comments are, I am in full agreement with that, what you just said. I wished that when we met this the first time, I asked Mr. Adams to go ahead and please get with the people that were around him and file it properly. Again, what bothered me was we didn't know the scope of how big of an area. It was just a roughed-in drawing. He didn't know how deep into the bottom he was going to go. And those were questions that I think we realistically, the planning director has a right to know, because he may go out there with an excavator and dig down 30 feet. We don't know. So I think to have those things in writing, if he would have brought that back to me with the proper, you know, for I don't even know what the word it is, but
okay.
to bring it back properly,
You know, I think
so that it conformed to what the planning director wanted, he probably would have got a yes vote for me, and I hope he does bring it back so that he can move forward with it.
Thank you, Commissioner Passion. I think we've kind of had this kind of deliberation before. This is simply a vote to adopt the final order of the
I understand that, but we asked for comment.
Okay,
He made comments.
Yep.
I'm making my comments.
very good.
And thanks for allowing that time, all the board and county council.
Yes.
And this is short. He can apply again.
Yes, he can, and I hope, that's what I'm saying, I hope he does. So for that, with that being said, roll call, please.
Commissioner Gold?
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce?
No.
Chair Pash?
Aye.
Motion carried 2-1.
9B, Parks Liaison, Ms. Schmelzer.
Yes, the board approved all of their liaison assignments at a previous meeting, and the Parks Department had requested a different liaison. So I was told to put this back on the agenda for discussion, so we could get a liaison appointed for that department. Josh Hopkins, who runs that division, had followed up and said, you know, if there's going to be controversy over it, just leave things the way they were, but it is on we do have to take action on it and assign a liaison.
Okay, I received an email from Mr. Hopkins that said something very similar to that. He was going to withdraw any objection to Mr. Boyce. If it's this board's choice to make a change, that's fine. If it's not, then however the board would like to lean, I have really, I have no preference who's the liaison.
If that's Josh's wishes, I say go with Josh.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm very baffled by the original intent on this. I have mega emails, very complimentary and supportive and encouraging of Mr. Hopkins, and that hasn't changed. And I look forward to working with him. I'll tell you, Parks has been very important to my family for a long, long time. I don't boast about the Boyce Cope thing, but I've got a picture here that is just the diversity we have in this county is just incredible. We'll start, oh, I don't have it. I'll be darned. Anyway, this is a great success story. The whole Florist Lake area, the Elk River area, I can come down here. There's the Elk River Fish Hatchery. Let's see if you'll go to the next one. Nope. I mean, this is Laird Lake. I've been there a couple times. The first time I went with Josh Hopkins, and he drives too fast. It was a total adventure.
He drives too fast for you?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm getting older, but he's also a very good driver. But my vision long-term on the parks, I sometimes use the example, if I may indulge the board here, Stubb Stewart. I used to take him upriver all the time, owner of Bohemia Lumber Company in Eugene. He and his brother, Fay, in their mid-70s, employed 1,000 people. And Fay was, he was famous for bringing big balloon logging in. He got his start from a Russian logging entity, and they're just two of the most incredible men I've ever been around. They're both dead and gone now. Stubbs' funeral, memorial service was the biggest one I've ever been to in my life. The point is this: Stubb Stewart devoted his life to Oregon State Parks, and that's, I want to follow that legacy. And it's just, even if the board doesn't decide to keep me on as liaison, I'm going to be very much involved. I have worked with the Coos County Forestry, spent several hours. They have 3 full-time employees. They have about, as does Josephine County, has coincidentally about 17,000 acres. Director Hopkins has provided me with a very good inventory of the different forest lands that we have. Where I'm going, Mr. Chair, is at some point, I think Curry County needs to have a forestry department, and I'm looking forward to that. I want to bring up my relationship with the Forest Service, BLM, Oregon Department of Forestry. I'm working very hard with the amount of land, as we all know, that this county has lost in the last 2 major fires, just the last 2. I'm pushing the federal people to give us some land to compensate for that. And I'm optimistic that over 5 or 10 years it will happen, not to mention the parks. You've seen Mr. Hopkins' presentation on just the Elk River aspect. I started working with Jay Trost the first year I was commissioner on the Social Security bar issue and potential option there. This Laird Lake, if you ever get a chance to go there, it is just beyond fabulous. And when you look at the contrast between that and Flores Lake or the Harbor Bench or Agnes, Rogue River versus Pistol River, it's just, this has got to be protected, and parks is such a positive aspect for us. I'm going to be involved because I think that's my responsibility, and I want to promote that within the community. You talk about fish habitat. This is not a very good picture, but that is about as clean a water as you're going to find anywhere on the planet. That's Elk River. First time I was up there, 6 years old, and again, I want to encourage anybody to visit that. Here's our camp post at Boyce Cope. He's had some health issues. I think he's doing very well now, and I have a couple letters of people that really support him. So yeah, I want to stay as the liaison. And I mentioned the forestry. I mentioned all the things that I think are good vision, and I've shared that with Director Hopkins, and I think he is capable, very capable, of following through and expanding the Curry County reach. And there's no reason for us not to have a. And by the way, the Coquille tribe, I'm getting very well acquainted with them over the years. They have we have 40 acres on the adjacent to their lands that they're thinking about logging, and so we want to be a good neighbor, but we want to know what their plans are, and so we might even consider selling that to them at some point in time. That's part of the inventory that Director Hopkins has provided. So I pushed very hard on the Citizens Park Advisory Committee, and here we are, and it took 3 tries, but this board thankfully approved that committee, and I think you heard Director Hopkins reference it today. So that's all I have on that. One more, so the same picture twice.
So I'll make a motion, we leave Commissioner Boyce as the Parks Liaison.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, 9C, appoint members of Suicide Prevention and Awareness Council. Ms. Schmelzer.
Yes, so we have, last fall we adopted an ordinance to create a Suicide Prevention and Awareness Council, and part of that required us to actually advertise for the positions. We posted it for a certain period of time. That posting has closed, Mr. Clay has been very instrumental in helping recruit people for those positions. He did send us in some revisions after the agenda went out, which would change the resolution that's in front of you. So I just have to ask Mr. Jesuit if he had time to amend it to reflect Mr. Gordon's, to reflect Mr. Clay's comments. You did?
I have put the changes in the order.
Okay. So if the board approves this today, they would be approving the recommendations that Mr. Clay went through this morning. Is that correct?
Yeah, except the board doesn't have the new order with the changes.
Right.
I have the new order right here.
Okay, but that order reflects what he was talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not what's in the packet.
Right, so there were some changes. So it would be, like JJ said, not what's before you, but what was presented to you this morning.
Well, I move that we accept the order as Mr. Clay reflected the changes in there.
Excuse me, there's some choices you have to make.
Oh, there's
Commissioners
choices?
have to choose. There's 2 people per 1 position. Commissioners have to choose which person.
Which position is that?
Well,
There's 4 positions, actually.
There's several.
One.
JJ, could you just walk us through which ones they have to select, or which ones they have to
Oh,
choose
sure,
from?
absolutely.
I can tell you right now, it's medical health, Michelle Hanna or Beth Barker Hidalgo. Another medical health, Teresa Costa and William Wasson, and/or Dr. Frank Von Beneseeth or Samantha Burke. Substance abuse, Britt Boyce or Beth Barker Hidalgo. And youth ambassador Isabella Henrique or German, I'm sorry, that's a single. So those are the only ones.
First responder.
Nancy Torney and Tara Odugno,
And
Randy Ullman.
And all of mine were the first choice. All my recommendations, and if there's any confusion there, I'd like to be sure to give those. For first responder, it was Nancy.
Sir,
Yes.
You have
need
to
to
be
come
at
up
the
to
mic.
microphones. Sorry, Mr. Clay.
I need the exercise. First responder is Nancy Tornay.
This is your recommendation,
This
correct?
was the recommendation I offered this morning. For mental health, it's Teresa Costa. For substance abuse, it's Beth Barker Hidalgo. And those are the 3.
What about medical health?
Medical health was only, on the thing I presented this morning, was only Michelle Hanna.
Okay, because there's 2 names on mine.
Yeah,
And that does not reflect this.
Okay.
Well, I move that we accept the positions here for the board as recommended by Gordon Clay.
Which, on substance abuse recovery, what was your recommendation, Mr. Clay?
was Beth
Okay.
Ms. Hidalgo.
Barker
Hidalgo. And then on mental health, I'm sorry.
Mental health is Teresa Costa.
Okay. And Nancy Torney for first responder?
Correct.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Do we have a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion?
Just, I couldn't vote for my wife anyway, but, and I never want to speak for her, of course, but she will remain on the edge. She's pretty busy right now, but is very interested in helping and serving and attending meetings, attending meetings now, but definitely being available in the future as potentially needed. And thank you, Gordon, for this great work again.
And we welcome her.
She's a great resource, a tremendous resource.
Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
All right?
Chair Pash.
All right.
Motion carried unanimously.
Mr. Clay, thank you for your patience being here, and thank you for all your work on this.
Aim to the end.
All right, next we have approve off-wind energy research. Commissioner Boyce.
Do you want some commentary on that, or are you okay generally with the concept for the research and the county resolution? Coos County has already passed it. Commissioner Pat?
I'd just like to have a little bit of brief.
Sure. Oregon is quite a distance behind California right now. And as you know, we've been researching this. They're referring it to, or as marine renewable energy. You also know we're at the end of the Bonneville Power Extension Cord in Curry County. There's a tremendous market for, not that this is the emphasis behind the potential project, there's a tremendous market in California. They are growing and have some expanding energy needs. We're talking about we're competing basically, we as in Coos and Curry County are competing with the Port of Coos Bay with the Port of Humboldt Bay. But they don't have the winds that we have. Coincidentally, the ports are fairly similar in size and capacity, so we want to build a pilot project. We have the Ocean Task Force or Alliance. It stands for Oregon Coast Energy Alliance Network. There's some very good people in Curry County and Coos County combined that have offered to serve on this board. I think one of the biggest things, the biggest concerns biggest concern that I have is the federal government is looking for energy, and especially as successful as this has been in Europe. There are some similarities and some differences, but the United States is basically 20 years behind. These will be 18 to 25 miles out. These are giant towers. There's a lot of the challenges and environmental concerns that have been addressed. To the extent I'm ready to report to the citizens of Curry County that they've all been addressed and these are not issues, no, I'm not suggesting that. But just Curry County taking the leading edge here and telling the federal government, we are a player in this. We are going to be at the table, and we will be easy to work with and anxious to contribute. And I think that's basically the message that Coos and Curry counties are doing.
So you're wanting to start a energy research board, or?
We're just supporting the ocean, and I'm also on the federal BOEM. I've only had 3 meetings so far, and they've all been by phone, thank goodness. But
I see what you're
Bureau
saying.
of Ocean Energy and I can't remember the last part of the acronym, but it's just I do want to sound positive for the potential it has for Curry County. We have some of the best offshore winds in the world. And the further out you go, I'm being told, this needs to be verified, the further out you go, the more consistent and the more powerful the winds are.
Okay, so you're just wanting to support the energy
The research.
research for offshore wind.
And there's already 3 or 4 developers that have come into Coos County and want to compete for that initial pilot project, which is probably going to be an 800-foot tower. 2 of them, I think, is what the proposal is right now. And they will build that in Coos Bay. The port of Coos Bay has already donated land. Then they're going to drag it out, and the engineers already figured out a way to upright it. And the difference between the European projects and the American projects is when you go out 25 miles maximum, probably more like 21, 22, the water is so deep. But they're trying to figure out a way to turn that to advantage. Shouldn't be an issue for the bird habitat because it's so far offshore. Shouldn't be an issue for the shipping lanes, although they're addressing that. Shouldn't be an issue for the wells because they stay fairly close to shore, but all that has to be verified.
Okay. Mr. Barnes?
Yes, please.
David Barnes, I was at this same presentation down at SWAC a couple of months, or last month actually, and I have a different takeaway from it. This is a private business enterprise that is looking to build a wind farm off of Coos Bay. The wind farm will not supply any power to Coos or Curry County. According to the proposal that was made, the power will be, they will run an underwater cable from the wind farm on Coos Bay to a terminal in Humboldt Bay, where it will be then taken and put into the grid down in Humboldt County for use by the San Francisco Bay Area electric market, who the city of San Francisco has recently said they will have X amount of their power generated by renewable sources in the next 20 years. As it currently stands, Curry County gets about 95% of our electric power from renewable sources. Between the BPA and a landfill generation project that CCEC is involved with, we get over 90% of our electric from renewable sources already. There's a couple things I want to bring up. In the last few issues of Ruralite, Brent Bischoff, the CEO of CCEC, has been writing a series about the weaknesses, let's call it, of wind power, and how it's a very complicated thing. And he explains it like riding a bicycle. In order to generate power, you have to ride the same miles per hour, whether you're going uphill or downhill. He's very good at what he says, but he's really questioning whether wind power is really appropriate off the coast of Oregon. To what Commissioner Boyce said, I agree. We have some world-class wind out here. One thing that we don't have out here is favorable sea conditions. The European model that Commissioner Boyce referred to tested these in 25-foot seas. The day of the meeting down in Swak, there were 75-foot seas between Astoria and Humboldt. So whether these would really work in our sea conditions is really questionable at best. A couple of weeks ago in the Curry pilot, a gentleman who was the wind specialist with the Oregon Department of Energy for 20 years and is still doing it, makes comment about how this is very complicated, wind is very complicated, and it might not be appropriate for the Oregon coast. Also, this will have an impact on marine migration. I have articles in front of me. The Navy sonar has had an impact on whale migration. It's caused whale stranding. I have that from Frontiers in Marine Science magazine. The Royal Swedish Scientific Academy has studied windmills and the effect on fish, and have determined that there is an effect on fish and whale migration patterns. Navy sonar is blips out into the water that happen and they go away. We're talking about a 24/7, 365 low-frequency vibration transmitter that is going to be placed off our shore. I'm in full agreement that we need to explore more renewable energy, but I'd also like to point out there was some work going on back east, Rutgers University, where I used to work. One of the PhD student in the science lab there has come up with something called a blue membrane. The technology has been real iffy for a while, but essentially what a blue membrane does is where salt water meets fresh water, it puts the two of them together through this membrane and extracts positive ions out of the water. It does not affect the composition of the water. It's 100% clean, and it puts it back out into the sea again. It creates energy doing this. A 1 square meter piece of blue membrane will power 4 homes, which means that maybe twice the size of this room is enough to power all of Gold Beach. Before you vote to promote this and to support research on this, I really think a much deeper workshop is required. To come here today and just say that you're going to promote this without really looking into it much greater, I think is very premature of you, and I would ask you to pull this matter for a workshop and discussion on another day. Thank you.
Commissioner Gold?
Some of my questions when I was reading this was, number one, who's going to be doing the research, because the integrity of research is based on who pays for that research, in my opinion. So those were some of my concerns. I've also read some articles about wind energy and corrosion here in our ocean, the high winds. I think at one time David Brock Smith was advocating this, and it kind of went down up in Port Orford. So that's all I have to say.
Commissioner Boyce?
That's a good point, but no, he was not promoting offshore wind. He was taking a serious look at onshore wind. Compared to the two, the onshore mills are about a third the size. They take up a tremendous amount of room. They are very noisy. They need subsidies, generally speaking, although there is some technologies that's improving those. Solar takes up a lot of room. Wave energy takes up a tremendous amount of room. So when you're looking for renewable and you want it out of sight, out of mind, there are some, it's a complicated program, and there are some issues. I'm not promoting offshore wind. I'm promoting the research, and I want Curry County on the leading edge. We are running out of hydropower. People want to get away from fossil fuels. So Oregon is, California is saying they're going to be completely fossil fuel free. That's not the right term, but I think it's by 2040. And so, and it's a good point that Mr. Barnes made that where's the power going to go at first? Is it going to go straight to California? That is the general idea, and I don't know if I can accept that either. But we're a long way from getting that prototype completed. I surely wouldn't want the appearance of Curry County being short-sighted on this and not even willing to take a serious look at following through with the research. Bonneville Power is, they're struggling and will be struggling financially just in the amount of money that they've been required to extend for the salmon recovery because of the hydropower. And that should be a huge concern to all Oregonians. And we're not going to build any more dams. We know that for sure.
Well, I always call myself a jack of all trades, but a master of none, and I got to be a jack of all trades, I think, by watching a lot of video and doing research on things to learn how to do it. I actually left school at quite a young age, and I am fortunate enough to have a daughter who just went through her PhD several years ago, and guess what her PhD was? Mostly research and presentations. I don't believe at this point I would be for wind energy either, but I welcome the research that goes into it so that we can learn more about it, and perhaps from that research we can find another resource or a way to use that energy in a different way. I have at one point looked at putting wind energy on my ranch. It was really expensive, so for the amount we would get out of it. So I don't feel as though wind energy is the greatest technology, but I do welcome the research on that. So if I could have a motion to support this.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it with a reservation that we have nothing to pay into that research.
That's not on the resolution.
That's not there.
This is strictly research.
Okay, as long as we don't have to pay for it.
Someone else is doing the research and paying for it. Any further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, next is to approve a letter of support for Rogue Basin Collaborative Landscape Restoration Proposal. Commissioner Boyce.
Great news. Let me read a quick letter from both Senator Jeff Merkley and Senator Ron Wyden to Vicki Christensen, Chief of the USDA Forest Service. And this is the CFLR grant, Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program, that would raise, if we succeed, and every day it looks a little better, especially with the senator's support. I'll just read, I think I can just read the first two paragraphs, Mr. Chair, in the interest of time. Dear Chief Christensen, we write to express our support for the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest request for Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. Funds for the Rogue Basin Landscape Restoration Project in Southwest Oregon. You get the idea that restoration is the emphasis here. The Rogue Siskiyou proposal focuses on addressing wildfire risk to communities. Number one, public safety, community safety. People living in the Rogue Basin will benefit from investments in proactive fire risk mitigation work. This strategic landscape approach, okay, I've read enough. I'm just very, very appreciative of their support, and it is, Representative Brock Smith's been following this closely, of course. I've been working on this for about 14 months, and we have some very good partners within Southern Oregon, and each day it looks like we've got it. That's the main reason I went back to Washington, D.C. in mid-December. And, yeah, I think that's all I need to say on that.
Commissioner Gold, any comments?
No.
I have one issue that I have to take up with you on this, sir. On the letterhead that's in the packet.
Yeah.
Is that me, or?
Oh, my gosh. Wrong commissioner.
He's got it on the wrong letterhead. He's got it on the past commissioner's letterhead.
Actually, you gave me I think you asked me for the letterhead, and I put it on, didn't I?
Well, we haven't approved it, though,
Anyway.
sir. Not until you...
I will not approve it as written.
Letterhead.
I will make a motion that
Thanks
we
for taking the fall
support
for
the
me.
letter, that we approve the letter of support, not on the current letterhead, to the Rogue Basin Collaborative Landscape Restoration Proposal.
So glad you got that.
What is
And
it
I'll
on?
second that.
Huh?
What is the,
Huxley.
Further discussion?
It was the 2018 Board of Commissioners
Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Aye.
Chair Pash.
I didn't even
Motion
notice
carried
that.
unanimously.
Oh, I read my packet. All right, at this time, we are going to enter into, oh, wait a minute. No, we're going to do commissioner updates. Director's report first, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I have a few things to report. On the Citizen Revenue Task Force, Emily Rumiano has resigned. So we're going to be running an ad to find another member for that group. I am going to be looking to pull that group together to look at, we've had several, we've discussed them, you know, different committees have put together ideas, so I want to put that packet of information to them and ask them what they think and basically give them something to work on. We have this group, we're not taking advantage of them, but there's been several committees in the past which have come up with ideas that really haven't gone anywhere. They've never been discussed, they've never been debated or brought to a meeting, so I want that group to actually look at them and decide which ones we seriously should be considering and which ones we should just say it can't happen and just set them aside. I also want people to understand we are looking at the work that they've done, we are considering their ideas, and we want to hear, just vet them a little bit on that, so I'll be putting that together on that. The Water Master we talked about a couple months ago that they would start holding office hours here. Today they actually arrived, so they will be having office hours a couple days a month, and they'll be located in the Community Development Department. So,
Did you get to eat your lunch on that, by the way?
I don't eat lunch. It's,
That was nice to get to meet them, though.
Yes.
That's good work.
So Moss Adams is doing our strategic plan, and we're wrapping that up. So next week, we have a special management meeting where the managers will be reviewing the, kind of the first of the final drafts, and they'll be giving some input. We'll be putting that, a revised final draft then in the packet next Friday for the board meeting the following week. In between there, we'll be having a listening session, or an open house, I should say, one in Brookings and one in Port Orford, to take some comment on that final draft, and then be presenting it to you at the board meeting, and take the feedback you have from that one, and then bringing it forward. I think it's 2 weeks after that then for adoption. Bottom line is, it's going to be scheduled for adoption mid-February. So that's coming along. We're wrapping that one up. As far as the wage study goes, we've indicated in the budget meeting we had some issues on that one. I've heard back from the state. I have to go through the email in a little bit more detail, but we've run into a couple issues with that. So that one there might be a little delay on, but I'm going to continue working on that one. So I'll just have to get back to you on that one. County properties, as you know, I've been going through the list when I can, or working with people on which properties to sell or how to proceed with those. Josh Hopkins in Parks has offered to help me with some of that, so I'm going to be giving him some properties to research and look at. The first ones I want him to look at are going to be the ones that were basically classified as forestry properties. They're up by the Elk River. They're adjacent to some tribal properties, so I want him to look into those and just kind of begin helping me chip away at that list. Because because it is winter and he's not in his other parks as often, and the other ones haven't formally been approved yet, he did say he'd be willing to allocate some time to help me out on that. So we're going to partner on that. Josh did find an issue. He was looking at some property I had asked him to look at along Harbor, where we were having some homeless encampments. And when he was researching the deed on that, he came across all these other deeds that were tied to that one deed, you know, other properties that were tied to that one deed. And in his research, he found out that the Oasis Park in the city of Brookings is really owned by the county. So what happened, there's a little bit of history on that one where an individual had wanted his property to be used as a park. He wanted to leave it to the city. The Lions Club worked with him. The city, the Lions Club, and this individual worked to build that little park. And
Is it on Easy Street?
It's on the corner of Hillside and 101. It's between the
okay.
marijuana shop and Darren Farmer's insurance company. So it's got some benches and a little bear on a pole. So anyway, so at the next meeting, I'll be bringing a recommendation back to the board on what we should do with that property. We're going to have a couple of options, and so if you have some time to run down there and look at it, great. If not, I do have some photos which I'll share with you at the meeting. With the resignation of the finance director, we have to look at what we're going to do as far as will we fill that vacancy, will we do a reorganization, or how are we going to handle that? I'm leaning towards making it part of the Administrative Services Department. That was also a recommendation by one of the previous committees that looked at ways to improve efficiencies and cut costs. But that is something that I'll be bringing forward to the board to actually make a decision on, something we have to do with that. And just lastly, I just want to let you know that previously I talked about finding space, and we were looking into the Rush Building or the Rogue Credit Union Building. Because nothing has really moved forward on the Curry Community Health case, I've just put all of that on hold and said we don't have the need for the space right now. It's too short a time to get something into the budget, so I've just stopped any progress on that at this point, and will not be bringing a recommendation to you soon on that. So.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you. I'm going to skip a couple things here, because I think we're going into executive session after this. Okay. On the Citizens Advisory Task Force, I don't know why we're spending more time on that, unless I don't know what else there is now that the TLT tax is done. We're not going to raise property tax. None of us, we've all been publicly, very upfront about that's not an option. I don't know what else there is. So one of the reports I have here is NEPA regulation reform, National Environmental Policy Act. The president has put it out there that, hey, we're going to shorten this system, and what that means for Curry County. It would maximize revenues. It would maximize our access to federal lands. It would put us in a better position for involvement in management decisions of those public lands. And it's already happening, certainly with where we've been working the last 3 or 4 years, especially since the fires. So if that it's going to be more effective, more efficient, and it will save time. And so the Forest Service has got a new direction. Where I'm going with this, harvesting timber instead of burning it. And it's a selective harvest, but that's how the money, the victories we've had at the AOCC, challenging, the ONC 1937 Act. I'm not saying that we're going to have a ton of money coming in, but I think that's where we're going to manage this county and how we're going to overcome the financial problems we have. But we've got to continue to work very hard on that. Also, Senator Wyden's endowment that would take the place essentially of the SRS funds and the PIL payments, payment in lieu of taxes. I can give a better report on that down the road. Director Schmelzer, you just kind of tabled the RFCU and the Rogue Surgery Center program. I'd like to have just somewhat of a plan to present to the board, pretty general, basic, on the 5th. If I assume that, I think we decided that is our next meeting, to where the road department might, if the deal is right, and I'm not promoting this, I just want to give you some information to think about. If the road department actually purchased the building, or even if the county did, and if we had enough leases and I think you could rent it to ODOT, because they have no office space in Curry County. We could promote that. One of these buildings is in Brookings, one is in Harbor. They're both coincidentally about 9,000 square feet, both in very good condition with some, they're still 30-year-old buildings. But as Director Schmelzer said, 62% of our population is in South County. I can see emergency management, improving the Veterans Office, all these things. I would just like to give you a report. I'm not denying that it might be best not to pursue this aggressively right now, but I have spent some time on that, and I'd like to come back to the board with that. You heard David Brock-Smith today mention Sudden Oak death, and our meeting yesterday was about 4.5 hours. We really do. Finally some good news there, too, in addition to the support for the CFLR grant from the 2 U.S. senators. And also we're getting widened support on the Rogue Siskiyou Regional Fire Training Center. He's if he hasn't already called the governor, he's going to do that in the next week to 10 days. We've provided him with some very detailed information, kind of the second phase. More on that later, but I'm also very optimistic on that. I put a lot of time into this, and I felt like I was making good progress, but as soon as former State Representative Wayne Krieger contacted the senator's office, it was the next day. So that was a good thing there. Let's see. 2021, U.S. Track and Field International Championships in Eugene. I think you're aware. There's going to be 3,000 media attendees, 190 plus countries, 2,000 athletes. This is a gigantic thing for Oregon. They just completed the new Hayward Field. There's 33,000. The reason I wanted to bring it up today and not postpone is because these 190 teams are going to be practicing. Pacific High School, Brookings Harbor High School have very, very adequate tracks. We're going to draw, as I understand, we're going to have the opportunity to bid to bring some of these teams into the various, north and south of Eugene. The Gold Beach track is in bad shape, but it might be an incentive that they could work on their track, and we'll get them on the river, we'll get them to the ocean, we'll get them into our beautiful area. So more on that later. Also, this, by the way, that's August of 2021. Then the Band and Dunes, the USGA, you'll be interested in this, Amateur Championship is August 9th through the 16th. I'll put a link up to, they're talking about 3,000 people coming for this. I'm sorry, I don't remember the number of contestants, but that's going to be some great residual for Curry County on the river and just sightseers, bicyclists, all the above. So more on that later. That's this summer, 2020. By the way, Band and Dunes on June 6th will open their 5th 9-hole course called Sheep Ranch. Let's see. The only other thing I want to add, the rest can wait, is on the 24th in North Bend, Oregon Community Action is opening up a veterans housing. It's called Deer Springs Terrace. And if you can get up there, the board can show support. This is my vision, our vision, I think, for Curry County on veterans housing, and we can learn a lot by going. This is a tremendous success story and great results, and so I'm hoping to be there, and I would encourage the board to be there, and we can legally both be there. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Gold.
I've been working with Curry Transit and getting reports and so forth for them. I'm going to make my report very short, so that's pretty much it for now. I'll report later.
Okay. A couple of things I wanted to bring up. Brookings Head Start dedication is February 7th. They're inviting everyone to come down. They will let us know what the exact time and location of that will be, but they are going to be having a dedication on the 7th of February, so put that on your calendars. Another thing I'd like to bring up is I've brought it up to ODOT a couple times. I brought it up to the Roadmaster, and I understand while I was gone, we had another incident on the bridge here with two tractors going, or a tractor going over with the double trailer. If anyone's ever sat at the Wedderburn store or tried to cross that road between May and September or October, you'll find it very difficult to do that. You put your life in your own hands. And I would again like the board to consider bringing a formal request to ODOT to look into reducing the speed limit coming off of that hill into the bridge of Gold Beach, and at a minimum putting a blinking light and or a stoplight at that intersection. It is just an extremely dangerous intersection. They refused to even talk to us about it a year or so ago when I asked them candidly off the record. And now with another incident, we had a bulldozer go off, a D7 Cat 2 years ago. We've had a couple of very serious accidents. And like I said, you can sit at the Wedderburn store and watch people coming off that mountain with these great big motorhomes pulling 30-foot trailers behind them, and their front wheel is barely touching the highway because that curve is so substantial at the very end of it. They're always into the second lane of that bridge, and I certainly don't want my child to be at the wrong end of that, and I would hope ODOT wouldn't either. So I'm hoping that we can maybe bring a formal request from this board to ODOT to look into a road study to reduce the speed coming off of that hill and possibly putting a flashing or a stoplight on the intersection of North Bank and
Are you asking
Highway
for a
101.
letter
Pardon?
from staff? Are you asking staff to prepare a letter or anything?
Well, I thought, we're in commissioner comments. I'm
Yeah.
asking staff to possibly put it on the agenda
Okay.
for the next meeting that we can formally discuss it. Because it's something that, sad to say, someday someone is going to get seriously hurt or killed in that intersection, and I don't want it to be on my watch. So those are my comments for this meeting. I, again,
Mr.
would...
Chair, I have one more thing related to that.
Let me finish, please.
Okay.
I just want to thank everyone while I was away for kind of handling everything. I appreciate you taking the chair last week, and Director Schmelzer for covering for me on a few things. And I just, my wife and I had a great time away, and it's time to roll up our sleeves and get back to work. So, Commissioner Boyce?
Hey, just your challenge to contact ODOT. Here's a letter that you can read when you have time, but it just basically says, hey, thanks for the work you've been doing. However, we have this issue right here, and that's at milepost 312. Well, I won't even do that. I'll just do this one here. But you see the guardrail's gone.
Right.
And they caught that in time, or somebody could have went off the cliff. So back to your point, we have been so fortunate. And yeah, this guardrail is about 10 feet down. And the other two pictures I have here are what they did at milepost 332, just south of Gold Beach. I think that was the closest we come to actually losing someone. You remember this, the hole that went straight down here was less than, I think it was about 11 feet from the edge of the pavement. And they just did an incredible job here. And that's not, one more picture, bear with me. This is the culvert system they did. At one point, this was straight off. I don't know how many tons of rock they hauled in here. I think that's going to hold. I think Huskenaden is going to hold. But I just want to politely, and this is part of what I did in D.C., was to talk to two senators in DeFazio's office. We're going to need the funds. We don't know what we're going to be dealing with the rest of this winter, especially now, I think, between Gold Beach and Port Orford. And I'm so glad they jumped on that one section. That's all. Thank you.
All right, so this time I'm going to, we're going to go into recess on this meeting, and we are going to enter into executive session. And when we finish with executive session, we will come back into session in our regular meeting. So,
Mr. Chair, the reasons for executive session are 192-660-2A is employment, 192-660-2B, which is discipline, and 192-660-2D, which is labor negotiations.
okay, so we are in recess. That isn't on yet, JJ. It's still blinking. There we go. We are back in. It is 5:52 on Wednesday. Staff is to proceed as directed per the executive session. Coming on next on the agenda would be to approve the hire ordered for the juvenile department. So we have a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold?
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce?
Yes.
Chair Pash?
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Next, we have approved the hire order for code enforcement.
I so move.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold?
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce?
Yes.
Chair Pash?
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Was there something else?
I want to make a motion on the open gov contract, Mr. Chair, that we discontinue this for up to 60 days until we get a CPA financial director into our organization.
Do I have a second? lack of a second, the motion fails. This, nothing further. This meeting is adjourned.